My name is Leslie J. Roll. I'm 31 years old, and the vacation I believed would save my relationship became the place where my boyfriend looked me in the eyes and told me another woman made him feel alive. The Mexican sun felt almost medicinal. It was a dry, clean heat that settled into my bones after months of gray skies and exhausting workdays. From my lounger beside the infinity pool, I watched Ethan tilt his face toward the sunlight while condensation slid down his margarita glass. This was the image I had carried for nearly a year. I had booked the trip 11 months earlier as a surprise, draining most of an account labeled Future Fund. That money had once been meant for a house deposit, emergencies, and eventually, a wedding. But Ethan had been miserable. His last 6 months at the marketing firm had turned him into someone permanently tired and quietly resentful. He brought stress home like a wet coat and wore it through dinner, weekends, and even sleep. I convinced myself Mexico could reset us. "You're staring," he said without opening his eyes. "Just memorizing this." He smiled faintly. "You happy?" I asked. "I'm always happy." The lie rested between us. "This place is incredible," I said, gesturing toward the turquoise water merging with the ocean. "Worth living on leftover pasta for a year." Ethan sighed. "Don't ruin it by talking about money, Leslie. It's not attractive." The comment stung, but I dismissed it as travel fatigue. Then I noticed her. Leona sat at the swim-up bar surrounded by guests, laughing loudly enough to control the space around her. She had bronzed skin, sculpted shoulders, and the confidence of someone who had never questioned whether she belonged. She swam directly toward us. "First day?" she asked, lifting herself from the pool beside Ethan's lounger. "Is it that obvious?" Ethan replied, smiling more naturally than he had with me all morning. "The paleness gives it away. I'm Leona." "Ethan, this is Leslie." Leona gave me a quick nod, then turned back to him. "You need the passion fruit mojitos from the beach bar. These are terrible." "We were about to order another round," Ethan said, although we were not. Leona flagged a waiter and ordered 3 drinks on her tab. That was how she entered our vacation. Within an hour, I knew she described herself as a digital nomad, managed cryptocurrency investments, and ran several online stores. She talked about surfing in Bali, skiing in Chamonix, and dancing at full moon parties in Thailand. Ethan listened with open fascination. When I mentioned that constant travel sounded lonely, Leona looked at me as though I had misunderstood life itself. "The world is full of people," she said. "You only get lonely when you stop being interesting." Her eyes returned to Ethan. "Some people have a spark. Others are content to watch." Ethan did not defend me. He simply drank his mojito. Leona joined us for lunch, then dinner. Every story I told sounded ordinary beside hers. My job managing construction projects was safe. My interest in learning scuba diving was cute. Leona had free-dived with sharks. That evening, I suggested attending a fire dancing show I had booked weeks earlier. "That's touristy," Ethan said. "Leona knows a private beach club." "I thought this trip was for us." "Don't start." Back in our hotel room, Ethan changed into a fitted shirt and sprayed on the cologne I had bought him for our anniversary. "Ethan, she's taking over our vacation. She's showing us how to enjoy it." "She's flirting with you." He turned from the mirror. "You planned a trip for the version of me you're comfortable with. Leona sees the version that wants more." "I have never stopped you from wanting more." "You build cages out of stability, Leslie. Then you call them love." He left without me. At 2 in the morning, I was still sitting on the balcony when the door opened. Ethan smelled of salt, smoke, and a perfume that was not mine. He stood beside the railing, staring toward the black ocean. "I can't do this anymore," he said. I waited. He finally faced me. "I met someone who makes me feel alive. Being with you feels like a slow death. Leona, that isn't the point." "It is to me." His expression hardened. "You were a placeholder, Leslie. Safe, reliable, boring. I want a real life." The words should have shattered me. Instead, they clarified everything. "Okay," I said. Ethan frowned. "That's all?" I entered the room, pulled my suitcase from the closet, and began packing. "You're not going to fight for me? You already made your choice." I zipped the suitcase and lifted it from the bed. "Where are you going?" "Home." "And what am I supposed to do?" I paused beside the door. "That is no longer my concern." Then I walked out, booked the first flight home, and blocked his number before the elevator reached the lobby. Ethan thought he had ended our relationship in paradise. He had no idea that by the time he returned, he would no longer have a key, a home, or any legal place in my life. The flight home existed somewhere between night and morning, between the woman I had been in Mexico and the one who landed alone with a suitcase beside her. I did not sleep. I stared at the flight map as the small plane icon moved away from the coast, crossing the dark gulf toward home. Around me, passengers breathed softly beneath thin airline blankets. Somewhere behind me, a child cried and was quickly comforted. No one comforted me. Strangely, I did not need anyone to. Ethan's words kept repeating in my mind. Safe, reliable, boring, a placeholder. Each repetition hurt less than the one before it because the insult was slowly transforming into information. I had spent years believing stability was something two people built together. Ethan had experienced it as something he was entitled to escape whenever excitement appeared. By the time the plane landed shortly after dawn, my sadness had become a list of tasks. The cold airport air shocked my skin after Mexico's humidity. I collected my suitcase, ordered a car, and watched the familiar gray city wake outside the window. It was not beautiful. It was real. When I unlocked the apartment, silence greeted me. Ethan's jacket still hung over the dining chair. His shoes were beside the door. The expensive candle he loved sat on the coffee table beside the resort brochure we had studied for months. For one moment, the weight of our abandoned plans pressed against my chest. Then, I remembered him leaning against the hotel railing, smelling like another woman while telling me our life was a slow death. I took out my phone and started a checklist. Change locks, separate finances, remove Ethan's belongings, end tenancy, contact attorney, reclaim home. The project manager inside me took control. I called a 24-hour locksmith. While I waited, I moved through the apartment collecting every financial document I could find: bank statements, lease papers, insurance information, and receipts from the vacation. The locksmith arrived 40 minutes later. He was a quiet older man who asked only one question. "All exterior locks?" "Yes." The drill biting into the doorframe sounded violent, final. When he handed me 3 new keys, they felt cold and clean in my palm. For the first time since Ethan ended our relationship, I felt fully awake. I opened the bedroom closet and began packing his things. Shirts, shoes, suits, the running gear he bought but rarely wore. The scent of his cologne drifted from one jacket, and the memory of buying it for our anniversary struck me unexpectedly. I stopped, breathed, then folded the jacket into a box. I did not destroy anything. I did not read his messages, search his pockets, or look for evidence of how long Leona had been part of his plans. The answer no longer mattered. The person who had loved me would not have done what Ethan did. The person who had done it no longer deserved investigation. By mid-afternoon, every possession belonging only to him was packed into labeled boxes. They filled one side of the living room like the remains of a collapsed life. I rented a storage unit 10 minutes away and made 3 trips. Inside the sterile unit, I arranged everything carefully, photographed the boxes, and secured the lock. Then I sent one message to Ethan's mother. Ethan's belongings are stored at Secure Store, Unit 47B. Access code 1892. The unit is paid through the end of this month. After that, payment and collection are his responsibility. Future communication must go through my attorney. I blocked her before a reply arrived. The most important appointment came the following morning. My attorney, Evelyn Hart, listened without interrupting as I explained the breakup, Ethan's departure from the shared residence, and my decision to remove his belongings. "We were never married," I said. "The lease is primarily under my name, but he contributed toward expenses." Evelyn reviewed the documents. We'll formally terminate any tenancy claim, separate the shared funds, and send a notice confirming where his property is stored. I want everything documented. That is wise. I closed the remaining joint account and transferred Ethan's verifiable share into an escrow account managed through the attorney. No accusations, no missing funds, no openings he could use to return. I took the rest of the week away from work, not to hide, to rebuild. I purchased new sheets in dark navy, a color Ethan once said made bedrooms look too serious. I threw away the floral candle and replaced the carefully arranged throw pillows. I shifted the furniture, painted one wall, moved my desk beside the window. With every change, the apartment became less like the place where Ethan had tolerated me, and more like somewhere I had chosen. The silence stopped feeling oppressive. It became space. 1 week after I left Mexico, an unknown number called. I let it reach voicemail. Ethan's voice filled the apartment. "What the hell, Leslie? I'm home. The key doesn't work. Where are my things? Call me back." No apology. No mention of Leona. Only outrage that the life he discarded had continued without him. I deleted the message. Minutes later, another number called. This time, his voice was louder. "You cannot lock me out of my own home. There's a lawyer's letter taped to the door. Are you serious?" I deleted that message too. Then his friend Sarah called. "Leslie, what Ethan did was awful, but you cannot leave him homeless. It is not his home anymore. Leona took his money and abandoned him. He had to buy an emergency flight back. He has nowhere to go." For a moment, the room went completely still. The woman who made him feel alive had left him stranded. I felt no satisfaction, only confirmation. "His consequences are not my emergency," I said. "He made one mistake. He made a choice. Have a heart. My heart is no longer available to him." I ended the call. Soon, Ethan began sending messages from unfamiliar numbers. "Please, I was stupid. Leona was a monster. I understand now what we had. You were always my rock. I still love you." I read each message once before blocking the number. He did not miss me. He missed access to the woman who organized his life, protected his future, and remained steady while he chased excitement. The rock he had called a cage was suddenly valuable because the fantasy had washed away. But he had already made his decision. And unlike him, I respected it. For several days after Ethan returned, unfamiliar numbers appeared on my phone like weeds pushing through concrete. Each message arrived with a slightly different tone, but they all carried the same demand. Let me back into the life I rejected. The first messages were apologetic. "Leslie, please." I was overwhelmed. Leona manipulated me. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Then they became nostalgic. "Remember the cabin trip? Remember how we used to make breakfast on Sundays? You said we could survive anything." After that came desperation. "I'm staying at the Sunset Motel. It's disgusting. My card is maxed out. I barely had enough money for the flight home. Please let me stay for a few days." I read them once, not because I was tempted, but because I wanted to understand whether anything in his words resembled accountability. It did not. Every apology centered on what Ethan had lost: the hotel room, the money, the apartment, the comfort. He never mentioned the humiliation of abandoning me during a vacation I had funded. He never acknowledged calling our shared life a slow death. He never apologized for treating my loyalty like a temporary shelter until someone more exciting appeared. He missed the benefits, not the woman who provided them. 3 days later, another unknown number called. This time, I answered. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Ethan exhaled shakily. "I know you're there." I waited. "How can you be this cold?" he asked. "After everything we had, you just erased me." His voice carried tears, but beneath them was accusation. "You abandoned me in another country," I said. "I made a mistake." "You made a declaration." I wasn't thinking clearly. "You were clear enough to call me a placeholder." He began crying harder. "I need you, Leslie." The words might once have broken me. Now they sounded like confirmation. The storage unit is paid through the end of the month, I said. Any further communication needs to go through Evelyn. Stop talking like a lawyer. My lawyer is the only connection left between us. You don't mean that. I do. His grief turned to anger with frightening speed. So that's it? You're punishing me forever because I met someone? No. I'm removing myself from the consequences of your choice. Leona lied to me. That has nothing to do with me. She took money from my account. She told me she had connections and convinced me to invest in one of her online businesses. Then she disappeared. For a brief second, I pictured him at the resort, intoxicated by her stories of freedom and wealth, handing over money because excitement felt more convincing than caution. I felt pity. But pity was not permission. You should speak to your bank, I said. I thought you would help me. I helped you for years. That's what people do when they love each other. You ended our relationship. I didn't know you would actually leave. There it was. The truth beneath every apology. Ethan had expected me to fight for him. He thought I would cry, compete with Leona, and wait for the fantasy to collapse. He believed my devotion made me permanent, even after he told me I was disposable. You believed I would remain available, I said. Silence. I was confused, he whispered. You were confident when you ended it. I regret it. Regret does not restore trust. He lowered his voice. Can we meet? One conversation, please. No. You owe me that. I owe you nothing. His breathing sharpened. You're acting like we were never happy. We were. That's what made your choice painful. Then how can you throw it away? I didn't. I paused. You did. Ethan became quiet. For once, he had no argument prepared. The storage information is in the letter, I continued. Do not call me again. I ended the call and blocked the number. That night, I sat alone in my newly arranged living room. The navy wall reflected the soft light from a lamp I had chosen without anyone's approval. The apartment no longer smelled like Ethan's cologne or the candle he loved. It smelled like fresh paint and coffee. A clean beginning. The following week, Evelyn confirmed that Ethan had collected his belongings. His mother signed the storage release, and the final shared funds were distributed. Every legal and financial connection between us was closed. At work, I returned with a focus that surprised even me. A major project had stalled during my absence, and within days, I reorganized the timeline, resolved a contractor dispute, and recovered nearly 2 weeks of delays. My director called me into her office. We're opening a lead project manager position, she said. I think you're ready. For years, I might have minimized the opportunity so Ethan would not feel threatened by my progress. This time, I accepted without hesitation. 2 months after Mexico, I signed a lease on a modern high-rise apartment overlooking the city. It was brighter, quieter, and entirely mine. I believed Ethan had finally disappeared from my life. Then one evening, as I crossed the underground parking garage after a late meeting, a figure stepped from the shadows near the elevator. Leslie? I stopped. Ethan was standing between me and my car. Ethan stood beneath the fluorescent lights of the underground garage, looking like someone who had spent weeks trying to reconstruct a version of himself that no longer existed. His hair was longer and uneven. The expensive linen shirts he had worn in Mexico were gone, replaced by a wrinkled jacket and dark jeans. There were shadows beneath his eyes, and his face carried the hollow strain of someone who had discovered that consequences did not disappear simply because he regretted them. Leslie, he said again. I kept several feet between us. How did you find me? He looked away. Your old coworker posted a picture from the building rooftop. I recognized the skyline. The answer unsettled me more than an accidental encounter would have. You should not be here. I know. I just needed one chance to talk to you properly. We already talked. No, you talked like I was a business contract. That was the only language you respected. He flinched. I pressed the key fob, and my car lights flashed behind him. Ethan stepped slightly to the side but did not leave. I understand why you changed the locks, he said quickly. I understand the lawyer and the storage unit. I deserved that. I waited. but we can still recover from this. There it was. Not a question. A plan he had already made for both of us. Recover from what? I asked. From Mexico. From Leona. From everything. You ended our relationship. I was confused. You were very clear. I thought I had found something real. And now? His jaw tightened. Now I know it was a fantasy. He told me Leona had disappeared 2 days after I left. She convinced him to invest several $1,000s in an online travel venture she claimed was close to launching. When he hesitated, she accused him of being afraid to live boldly. He transferred the money. The following morning, she was gone. Her room had been cleared. Her phone was disconnected. The resort staff told him she had checked out before sunrise. Ethan spent 2 days trying to locate her while paying for the hotel room alone. By the time he returned home, his account was nearly empty. I lost everything, he whispered. No, I said. You lost money. His eyes lifted toward mine. You still had your family, your friends, your job, and a place to collect your belongings. Do not confuse consequences with having nothing. I lost you. You gave me away. He shook his head. I didn't mean it. You said being with me felt like a slow death. I was intoxicated by the moment. You called me a placeholder. I was trying to convince myself. That makes it worse. His expression collapsed. For months I had imagined this moment differently. In some versions, I screamed. In others, I told him exactly how deeply he had wounded me. Standing there now, I felt only distance. He was a person from an old project whose files had already been archived. I started therapy, he said. I hope it helps. I left the marketing firm. That may be good for you. I'm staying with my brother until I find another apartment. I nodded once. Every statement sounded like evidence he believed should earn him another chance. I have changed, he insisted. Change is not something you announce after 2 months. It is something you prove over time without demanding that the person you hurt return to witness it. His face tightened. I am not demanding. You found my home and waited in the parking garage. He looked toward the elevator. I did not know how else to reach you. You were not supposed to reach me. The sentence landed. For the first time, he seemed to understand that my silence had not been a temporary punishment. It had been a decision. I miss who I was with you, he said. I almost pitied him. You miss the version of yourself that had someone protecting him from consequences. That's not fair. It is the most honest thing I can tell you. He took one step closer. Leslie, I love you. I remained still. Maybe you do. But love without respect is only appetite. He stared at me. We had years together. And you traded them for one night of feeling alive. I was miserable. Then you should have spoken to me before pursuing someone else. I thought you would never understand. You decided that for me. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to live with what I did. That is work you must do without me. He wiped his face angrily. Is there someone else? The question revealed what still mattered to him. Not whether I was healing, whether another man had taken his place. I have gone on a few dates, I said. His expression changed immediately. With who? That is not your concern. So you replaced me? No. I opened the car door. You removed yourself. He stood motionless. Please, he whispered. 1 coffee. No. 1 hour. No. Closure. I already have it. His desperation hardened into frustration. You are acting like I meant nothing. You meant enough to hurt me deeply. His face softened, almost hopeful. But that does not mean you still belong in my life. I slid into the driver's seat. Before closing the door, I looked at him one final time. The woman you left in Mexico would have taken you back. She would have believed your apologies because she still measured her worth by whether you chose her. He stared at me through the open doorway. She does not exist anymore. I closed the door. Through the windshield, Ethan looked small beneath the harsh garage lights. I started the engine. He did not move until I reversed. As I drove toward the exit, I refused to look in the mirror. The city opened before me, bright and indifferent. For the first time, I understood that Ethan had not lost the woman I used to be. He had created the woman who no longer needed him. After the parking garage encounter, Ethan finally stopped appearing. No more unfamiliar numbers. No more messages sent through friends. No more dramatic apologies carefully designed to place his pain at the center of what he had done. The silence returned, and this time, it felt permanent. I strengthened the building's security notice anyway. My attorney sent Ethan a formal warning that any further attempt to contact me at home or work would be treated as harassment. He did not respond. For several weeks, life became beautifully ordinary. I settled into the lead project manager role, handling larger budgets and more complicated teams. The work was demanding, but unlike my relationship with Ethan, effort produced something stable. I also continued seeing Daniel Mercer, a civil engineer I had met through a professional conference. We took things slowly. Daniel did not speak in dramatic promises. He showed up when he said he would. He asked questions and listened to the answers. When I mentioned that I sometimes needed quiet after a difficult day, he did not accuse me of being boring. He simply said, "Tell me when you want company." That sentence meant more than Ethan's loudest declarations ever had. One evening, Daniel and I were eating dinner at a small restaurant when he asked about Mexico. I had told him only that a previous relationship ended during a vacation. "You don't have to explain," he said. "But I don't want you to feel like you need to hide parts of your life to make me comfortable." So I told him, "The resort, Leona." The words, "slow death," and "placeholder." The flight home, the locks, the storage unit. Daniel listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "He confused peace with emptiness because chaos made him feel important." I sat with that thought for a long time. Ethan had always wanted to feel alive, but he defined life as movement, danger, and attention. Stability terrified him because stability left him alone with himself. My calm had not suffocated him, it had exposed him. Several months later, I received a final letter through Evelyn. It was from Ethan. He respected the legal boundary this time and sent it only through my attorney. The letter was different from his earlier messages. There was no request to meet, no demand for forgiveness, and no claim that Leona had manipulated him into becoming someone else. He admitted that he had been unhappy long before Mexico, but had been too cowardly to speak honestly. He said he allowed resentment to grow because blaming my stability was easier than confronting his own restlessness. Then he wrote, "You gave me a future, and I treated it like evidence that my life was ending. I understand now that I was not trapped. I was loved. I destroyed that because I wanted to feel extraordinary for one night." I read the sentence twice. It was the closest he had come to understanding. I did not reply. Some apologies deserve acknowledgement. Others deserve only to be believed from a distance. Ethan's letter did not change the ending. It simply proved he had finally stopped lying about why it happened. I placed it in a drawer, not because I wanted to preserve him, but because it belonged to the record of a life I had already outgrown. A year after Mexico, my company assigned me to oversee the restoration of an old coastal hotel. On the first day, I stood on a balcony overlooking the ocean while contractors moved through the rooms below. The view reminded me of the resort. For a moment, I saw my former self sitting alone beneath humid darkness, listening to a man tell her she was too ordinary to love. I wanted to reach backward through time and tell her something. You are not boring because you build carefully. You are not weak because you love steadily. And you are not responsible for rescuing someone from the consequences of choosing chaos. The hotel project took 9 months. Daniel visited several times, but he never treated the place like our future depended on creating perfect memories there. We walked the shoreline, ate simple food, and returned to our separate rooms when work demanded rest. Nothing felt forced. There were no performances, only honesty. Looking back, I no longer think Ethan left me for Leona. He left for a fantasy in which responsibility disappeared and excitement replaced character. Leona was simply the person who opened the door. Changing the locks was not revenge. Packing his belongings was not cruelty. The lawyer's letter was not cold. Those were the first decisions I made after realizing that love does not require leaving the door open for someone who has already chosen to walk out. My name is Leslie J. Roll. I once emptied my future fund to save a relationship. Now I invest in a future that does not require me to disappear so someone else can feel alive. Ethan called me a placeholder. He was wrong. I was the foundation. And when he chose to abandon it, I finally understood that I was strong enough to build somewhere else.